All right, well, let's jump in and we can continue to add people as we go, but we want to be mindful of everybody's time. Thanks so much for being here. We're going to be talking about community canvassing and voter registration with Kate Atkinson from We the People Action Fund, and we are super excited to have her here. Lynn,
Cool. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Melinda. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the co-director of client success here at Reach, along with Leslie. We will go ahead and do super brief intros, and then we will go through our agenda and get started. So I will pass it to you, Kate.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm Kate Atkinson. I'm the Data and Technology Manager at We the People Michigan. I've been there about 3 years now, and I live in Michigan, and I actually live in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which is very rural, looks a little bit different than maybe how some people view Michigan, or it looks like how it looks in your mind on the promotions. And I'll pass it to Leslie.
Um, I have actually been to the Upper Peninsula, Kate. I am Leslie Brilliant. I, along with Melinda, am co-director of client success. I also use she, her pronouns, and super excited to be doing this webinar and talking about how one of our really great clients has been using Reach in some really interesting ways and doing important work in Michigan. Next slide.
Cool. Thank you both. So first, we'd love to hear from all of you. So in the chat, please put your name, your pronouns if you would like, the organization you're with, and your location into the chat. And an optional icebreaker we have is outside of voting, what is one thing you think we should all be doing to build a more just and equitable world? And to give my answer, one thing I would suggest is working on reducing car dependency because we can increase housing closer to jobs. We can provide communities that are more able to have folks who aren't able to drive to get around. We won't have as many folks who can't safely drive still trying to drive because they'll have other alternatives. So there's one small piece for me. And Leslie and Kate, if you would like to share your answers.
I just put mine in the chat, but I'm based in Cooperstown, New York, and what I would really like to see is that I think would build a more just and equitable world is if we were able to better embrace and celebrate all of the diversity that makes up our country.
Yeah, awesome. And for me, I would say I'm going to connect it to the work We the People Michigan does, which is building, deep relationship across geography and, racial backgrounds, primarily through like working class issues.
Great. Thank you. So the first thing we're going to talk about is why community canvassing, and then we're going to talk about building a community canvassing program and the importance of accountability in voter registration. Then we're going to talk about recruiting volunteers and training volunteers. And then we're going to talk about actually running a community canvassing program and have some time for Q&A at the end.
And we'll also be sending out the slide deck and the recording after this webinar. So don't worry about taking notes or anything. It will all be available to you. So real quick Reach overview. So Reach began as a custom voter search engine built for the AOC campaign in 2018. As some of you know, that campaign sort of defied expectations. And one of the ways they did it was by talking to people everywhere and anywhere and gathering that data and sending it back to the campaign so that they could continue to build those relationships outside of, more traditional door knocking and phone banking. And so our first screen was really about harnessing the power of community canvassing, and Reach has developed from there. But we are always super excited to go back to our roots and talk more about how Reach is used for community canvassing because it is a really important part of what we do.
Great, thank you. So a little bit about We the People Michigan. We are a base building organization. So we're sometimes a little bit unique in that that base building is like the core of what we do, not necessarily that electoral work. So we operate, year round, building relationship, building community development by like congregating people, getting to know their issues, and getting to know how we can support them in their community. And I'm excited to go over some of the ways Reach helps support that mission.
So why community canvassing? There's lots of ways to talk to folks. Why is this an important one? First of all, it is really a way to deepen conversations and relationships within communities. Sometimes these are called like neighbor to neighbor programs. You've heard them called deep canvassing programs. But the idea is really you start conversations with people in your community and then you continue and grow those conversations and build those relationships. By using a tool like Reach, it means that every single one of those interactions is an opportunity to not only engage, but also to collect data, and that data can then inform ongoing conversations and opportunities to invite people into the movement. It's also really important way to give volunteers and often this work is also done with paid staff. It's not just volunteer driven but folks a way to be very vested in their communities. And we know that, you know, post-COVID, I think door knocking has gotten harder and harder to motivate people to do. But when you talk about talking to your neighbors, talking to the people you already maybe see in the grocery store, or pass every day, or connect with on a regular basis, people get more comfortable with the idea of going to talk to people and introducing themselves like, "Hi, I'm your neighbor down the street." And then it's also a way to really easily identify people who are not yet voters and help them register to vote right on the spot, and then follow that through so that when they become voters, you can help them engage in the electoral process. And then there's different ways you can sort of build a community canvassing program, and Kate's going to talk about the way that We the People is doing it. But there's sort of the neighborhood canvassing model that I talked about. You have people canvass their communities and neighborhoods. Um, it's important for people to understand why community canvassing is important. And I think it can sometimes be taken for granted that like the people in your circle are already engaged or like your radius, but that is not always the case. Um, it's important to set up survey questions if you're using Reach or just scripts that folks are using in ways that really foster natural conversation. Um, a lot of times I've had the experience where somebody's going out with a script and they're trying to follow the script and it just doesn't sound like how people talk. So one of the things you want to think about is like giving people what they really need to help foster a more authentic and organic conversation. One of the things you can do in Reach is use like display question as to provide really specific wording of questions so that people kind of know how to frame it. And then the other important thing when you're building your community canvassing program is to really think about how do you foster connection between the person who's just knocked the door or met somebody at a high traffic event to have an ongoing conversation. And one of the ways you can do that in Reach is that you can provide scripts that they can easily send follow-ups to keep the conversation going. And often with these community canvassing programs, what we recommend is those scripts should really be about like resources. So, it's a harder ask to be like, hey, do you want to stay in touch than is, would you like me to send you a text with some resources in our neighborhood for senior programs? Right. So providing all of that to your staff and volunteers who are doing this work really helps you build a more robust canvassing program.
A little bit about We the People's community canvassing. So one thing that we like to do for it is giving volunteers like a list of like a neighborhood or a street or a building to canvas. Of course, like you can canvas your own neighborhood, but people who are really into it, sometimes they do everyone on their block and then they're like, okay, who's next? We also really like to set up scripts as an action card. So it's kind of nice about that is like you can open the app and it's right there. Like your script is there or whatever partition you're gathering. The use of these action cards, they help a lot. Survey questions. So those let us, tie it back to what it looks like in the back end. Also, on the previous slide, it was mentioned that you can use the display question. So we'll have several questions that tie back to the same survey question. We use that for like if you need a Spanish translation or if you want to word the question in such a way that like it connects with a different demographic a bit better. But maybe on the end, like it all comes back to like, are you interested in voting for this like state Senate House election? Um, and then we also use the contact scripts that helps you like personalize follow-ups. So like as it was mentioned, like you want to kind of get that actionable next step. Like, can I text you this? Well, in some apps, it's not like the script isn't right there. Reach makes it very convenient for you to like find the person you wanted to text and just like select that script. And then it's all set to go. Like, how do you word it? What are the links? What are the questions? And then they can just send it off. And finally, a feature that we really love in Reach is the voter registration. Sometimes that's like a bit much for like door-to-door community canvassing, but for me, like when I go spot canvassing, you have people who are like, oh, I don't know if I'm registered to vote, I'm not sure. And you can like ask them, like, oh, I can look you up. I also love it, like you're with friends and like you have a friend of a friend and it comes up. And then you like in Michigan, we have a very robust online voter registration track. So like I've been at like dinner parties where I'm like, oh, I can just like register you here. Reach has all of the links. It's all up to date. It's like I'll just pull it up and hand them my phone. And that's how I tend to get people registered to vote.
That's a great dinner party activity, Kate.
Love that. Cool. So I wanted to talk a little bit about trackable voter registration. So as you all know, voter registration is a really important part of expanding the electorate, right? But how do we do that? And how do we do that effectively? So we've set up a way for you to be able to easily keep track of how successful folks have been, how many voter registrations they've started, how many they've completed. You can assign point values to both of those things and see them in the leaderboard so you can shout out volunteers who have been doing the most of this work on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, etc., and incentivize them however you'd like. Because we put people onto a voter registration pipeline, you're able to see where they're at in the process. You get a notification once they become a registered voter, and then you can follow up with them and make sure that they actually go out and vote. So I'm sure most of us have signed somebody up to vote and not really had a sense if that person actually became a registered voter in the end or not. So it's really nice to be able to actually track where those voter registrations went and see how many of them become registered voters, and then to also congratulate them on their journey and make sure they stay engaged. So the steps for what this will look like in Reach is first, of course, you would be setting up your Reach campaign with contact scripts and action cards and all those sorts of things. And then you would create specific user groups to target contact scripts and action cards. So one demographic I think of as being helpful for this is if you have older adults, perhaps you want to be able to have lengthier, more in-depth descriptions that are easier to follow and navigate for folks who might have more questions and might be a little bit newer to organizing online. And you can also have user groups to folks on the other end when you have young people who maybe use slang that I don't know the words for, right, when communicating with their friends. So being able to come up with different scripts to target different communities. We have a volunteer training deck that makes it a lot easier to get organizers trained on Reach. So this is something that you could find on our website. We have it linked here in the deck. as Leslie mentioned, we'll send out the deck as well as the recording so you could see that as well. We also really encourage you to schedule a series of events so that once folks are excited, you're able to give them another opportunity for them to put on their calendars to continue engaging with you. We also really recommend using Reach Chat for questions and troubleshooting. One of the really nice things about that is that folks are able to get their questions answered within the Reach app. And because they don't have to go out to their messaging app or they're calling to call you, they're able to not lose their spot and get their answer and keep going with their work.
Perfect. So a little bit about how we train our volunteers here at We the People Michigan is it's really important to like go step by step. So Reach has some great resources that we use to support us in that, but it's definitely making sure that like you're prepared and have time to like go through step by step. And sometimes it's like you have to sort of navigate people to an app store to download the app, and even work with them to get through the account creation process. Definitely, if your volunteers have the technical literacy, like you can try to get them to do it ahead of time. But then once they're actually in the app, the interface is not super confusing. We kind of have a pipeline where they select the group, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. But definitely going like step by step through the app. And then there is the training on like how do you go and like do the canvas. So like how do you want to be talking about the issues? Is this like do you want to get people riled up? Do you want to have a friendly conversation? Is this introductory type of conversation? So we'll go over some tips like that, and that depends on like the script or what we're looking to have people canvas for. We also make use of a ladder of engagement. So for some people, and like I know when I first started, like I was very nervous. So what's sort of nice about Reach is like you can get your own context in there, send out a couple of texts with the pre-made script, and just like get your feet wet with talking about, politics or issues, which can be really nerve-wracking to some people. And those scripts make it really easy. Then once people are kind of comfortable with that and the app, then you can sort of send them out. So like go find a neighbor you know or a neighborhood you're familiar with. And then, long term, it's like a new building you've never been in or a new neighborhood you've never been to. And yeah, that's a pretty good overview.
So, as Melinda and Kate both mentioned, we have a volunteer training deck that you can customize. It basically, I'm not going to run through it right now, but it will be linked when you get the slide deck. Um, and you are welcome to download it, make changes to it. And the nice thing about it is it includes all the different components of Reach, and so you can delete slides for things that maybe your organization isn't doing, and highlight the ones where it is. So we want to make it really easy, and we have other materials available as well on the website, in our knowledge base.
Awesome. And so some of the best practices we do here at We the People Michigan is definitely training your volunteers. You want to make sure that they know how to use the app before they're out there talking to people. And you want to give them that overview on like, how do you canvas? Here's what we're talking about, making sure they feel comfortable with the script. I also think that sometimes with us, it's like making sure that people understand that they're allowed to do some ad-libbing with the script. If it's not connecting, and sometimes you have to shift the conversation to just like keeping it nice, that's totally fine. And then just mark it when you're done. It's really important to like set your volunteers up. So what we usually do is we like have the thing we want the volunteers to do and we make that an action card and we pin it to the top. So typically that's like the script they're using, or that is like the petition we're looking to go and fill out. So it's like really easy for volunteers to find and use in their conversations. Survey questions, you want to put that in an order so like the flow makes sense. You don't want to like ask if you can follow up right at the front of the conversation because you haven't built any rapport. In here we have, context scripts, they reinforce that neighborhood model. Um, and there's also a chat feature in Reach. So like you can have your volunteers in a group in Reach and they can all have like their own text thread. That I think is helpful sometimes because everyone has like an iPhone or Android or different texting apps. Like you try to make those text threads and they can get a little out of control. The Reach app can kind of confine that mess there a little bit. Reach has a really powerful user group feature. So typically the pipeline we have at We the People, we're a little bit different because we do so many campaigns that are so different across the state. So when our people, they join our campaign, the first action card is to pick the group that they're in. And we have that as like the campaign. So like it's Fresh Start, or it's Los Neros, or it's Ginger Root, and then we'll also have like the geography. So it'd be like Detroit, Grand Rapids, Benton Harbor, and then they can kind of pick that. Then that group has assigned to them pinned action cards. That's like, okay, here's your Canvas script. You can do it. And we try to combine this with like a team meeting they're prepared to, or like ahead of the Canvas. So there's a little bit of support there. Reach also has a push notification feature, which is kind of cool. We're looking at using that right now, right? Because the um, primary is coming up next week here in Michigan. So the idea is that, yes, you have like your scheduled canvas you want to do on Tuesday, but everyone in the app can go do some free form canvassing, right? So push them a notification like, hey, reminder, it's election day. Check your script, go knock some doors, send some texts, right? There's a lot of steps on that engagement ladder you can go down. And there's just like a lot of ways to engage your volunteers too. There's the leaderboard in Reach, there's an admin dashboard, there are these notifications, there's like media tools you can upload. You can also like include share options. So like maybe at the end of the campaign, the goal is right, you win, and then you can make an action card that makes like celebrating that win on social media really easily. So there's a lot of like great things that we can do with Reach. Wait, can I say one more thing?
Of
Yes,
course.
please say as
Yeah. So another thing that we like about Reach too is that it's really free form. So some tools are like really structured in how you can canvas, but with Reach, because sometimes what'll happen is like someone's knocked all the doors you assigned to them. With Reach, it's like keep going. You can keep looking people up. You can keep checking their tag to see if they're in the correct district that you're looking for, and people can keep going. And then, if they miss it, they can do it on their own. They can do their friends and family. So that's a really great feature too to make sure that volunteers understand.
Thanks
Okay,
for
now
that,
I'm done.
Kate. I see we have a question. I think we're on Q&A, right? Yeah. So I see a question from Anthony. If you want to unmute yourself, can Reach easily pull up all voters nearby? Can Reach see the location of the user? Or can you easily search people in a 3 block radius? So, not quite, but there are other options within the Reach search. So one thing you can do is like you can put in part of an address and it will pull up all the voters like on that street or in that building. And then you can filter those voters in different ways. You can filter by party, you can filter by age range. So let's say in a program like this that they're knocking on the doors of seniors to tell them about heating assistance. You could pull up all the registered voters in a building, and then you could filter it by age, and so only knock the doors of people who are 65 plus kind of thing. So it's not quite like a turf cutting tool, like maybe what you're talking about, or a distributed canvassing tool right now. But there are ways that you can um, modify that kind of program to make it work with Reach. You can also pull somebody up with just part of a name. Um, so there's different ways you can filter it.
That's great. Thanks. I just heard you, Kate, say something about like someone had finished their assignment or their turf, and I wasn't quite. I used Reach in 2020 and 2021, and I'm just curious if there have been any changes around these types of things about assigning turfs or assigning neighborhoods, or if it's still the way it was in 2020.
So there are ways we can do that. If that's a really important part of the work, we can do that as what's called a custom data project. which I know Kate, you and I have talked about before, but where you can sort of assign folks to your volunteers or your staff in Reach. But generally, when folks are using it that way, they might be pulling a list somewhere else, and then people are just looking those people up in Reach as they're knocking the doors and canvassing them from there. Or sometimes it's really just about, I think in Kate, you can answer this, but like a neighborhood or an area where you don't really have all the names because you're not necessarily just canvassing voters. Like you want to be talking to everybody. And so you're saying like knock all the doors, you know, on this block. So I think Kate, that's more kind of how you guys think about turfs, right?
So, I mean, so we do both, right? I mean, we definitely have the tool for the more traditional, here is your turf, go canvas it. But for some of our staff and our volunteers, they're trying to organize like an apartment building. So they've had tremendous success with Reach, where they'll look up the apartment building and then it gives them every complex. And specifically, a really important piece of feedback is that Reach doesn't make you skip houses, whereas a more traditional turf cutting tool will have you skip like non-engaged voters. And then like volunteers, like they can just like know that there's an apartment building in their area or they have a friend in one and go canvas it. And they don't have to go through a data administrator like me to like cut them a turf. Um, we have done a few where we did it more traditional style, where it was like, here is a set of addresses, go canvas them with Reach. Um, it's a little bit more cumbersome because you are looking up each address every time, but you can make it work. It kind of depends what you're looking for, though.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And I see from Vivian, how
Oh,
does Reach?
sorry. I just wanted to add one more thing to that
Yeah,
answer.
go ahead.
So, another thing to think about is if you wanted to make a list and assign it to somebody, you could email that to them and have them sync it with their Google contacts and then have those folks in their phone. So if you wanted to do that, they could then add them to their network and canvas them. So for example, for folks who have seen any of our YouTube videos or have attended a Reach training, you'll see that Leslie and I have folks from Westeros in our phone books. And so that's how we're able to sync those contacts. Of course, before we started at Reach, we didn't have people in Westeros in our phone, right? So that's how we did that through syncing Google Contacts. So just wanted to offer that solution that might be helpful for some folks as well.
Thank you, Melinda. I completely forgot. Yes. And every once in a while, I'm like, oh, I have characters from House of or Game of Thrones in my contacts. Um, okay, Vivian asked, how does Reach differ from Empower? Any reason we should use Reach over Empower? Um, I have never used Empower, so I don't know. Um, but maybe some of you who have used both have an answer. I am not sure.
I definitely think that the content sharing is significantly different and not an offering of Empower. So that's not something that we talked about that much today, but definitely something you could see more about in our knowledge base and being able to have the ability both to promote excuse me, pieces of content for your users to share, but also to collect user-generated content and then approve and then have that content be available to other folks. And another really neat element of that is we actually have shared content libraries. So organizations that have more resources dedicated to creating content, sometimes will opt to make their galleries accessible to other campaigns. And so then you'd be able to have a whole bunch of really great content for your users, even if you were an organization that didn't necessarily have the capacity of creating that content on your own. But I also have not used Empower, so I don't know a ton about the specifics there.
Um, so yeah, and Andy has used Empower. He said finds that Reach has broader functionality. So I don't know, Vivian, are there specific things that Empower doesn't do that you are looking for, or something we can answer for you about Reach's functionality? Happy to do that. Or anybody else. has a question about whether we do something. Um, the next question is for Kate from Andy Moore. Can you talk more about how you brand each of the sub campaigns under the umbrella of your organization?
Yes. So there's a couple ways to do this, and we're kind of navigating both. So there is the option to have multiple campaigns, and then you sort of have the like legal prospect of it. So we have We the People Action Fund, and then we also created a campaign called Fresh Start. And on that, like everything has to be like paid for by We the People Action Fund. I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is that, that keeps it compliant. The other way that we do it, and this is my preferred way because it makes the administration much easier and much more consistent across campaigns, is we set up groups for each campaign. So we have a campaign for Ginger Group, which is organizing amongst young Black men in Detroit, and then we have a group that is like We the People UP, which is organizing in the Upper Peninsula. There are two ways to get people into those groups. One is we have this action card where if you're not in a group, it displays this action card that's like pick your group. Or Reach has a really nice feature that lets you share a campaign key, which when you sign up with Reach using that, it puts you in the group. And that creates a much more seamless experience for the user. I will say, uh, as an organization, this is a thing we've been struggling with more broadly. That's not a reach issue, but is sort of making sure people understand that their individual campaigns, are of We the People Action Fund. Um, so like that could be like an internal issue to navigate. But if you are like just doing like different uh, issues, I think it would be really easy to do like this group focuses on, driver's ed. This group focuses on mental health. That would make it pretty seamless, I think, for people.
Yeah. Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah,
This is like a super genius tactic to me. And so I'm really interested when you mentioned it earlier. So I do some work here in Oklahoma, and we work with several other organizations that are, in many cases, not action organization. It's like a few people who have banded together and are trying to make change. Um, and so we're like looking at how do we I was trying to find a way to like have our account and then have subsets of questions and users that are focused on like the Black community, the Latino community, certain neighborhoods that might want to talk about this one's about sidewalks, this one's about schools, whatever it is, but not have all of those questions appear for everybody. So I love the way that you can like, I think by assigning users like by having them pick which one, it sounds like you can have like a set of questions that only show up for that user group, right?
absolutely. So yeah, I think in what you're describing, definitely you would want to use user groups. The
Yeah.
big I don't know how Reach feels about this because like there's things on their billing stuff, but a big disadvantage though with the campaigns is like all of this has to be kind of separate. Whereas when you do this group method, I can have like the same survey question, will you vote in 2025 for all of these? But the question can be different, right? It can be like, will you vote for mental health? Will you vote for X, Y, and Z in your community? And they can all tie back to that will you vote question to your CRM. Like if you use Man or whatever as well, it'll sync.
Yeah. Well, and even the workflow I'm most interested in right now is that we have a group of volunteers that are canvassing in the Latino community in South Oklahoma City. And so we want to have the same questions in Spanish, and they've already translated them, but not all the volunteers that show up with them, like they have some English speaking and some Spanish speaking, and we want it to be in the native language for who the user is so that they can be better prepared. And I was like, man, aside from having like we've tried it with Empower and we just had all the questions in English and Spanish, and it made the script like really long. But this way, you could like have users kind of like opt into the English version or the Spanish version, and then have just those questions in there. But all the answers go back to the same, database at the end. So that's this like just made my life 10 times easier. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I would have a group that's like it in English and then the same group it in Spanish, and then just do your questions duplicate.
And just so you know, also the entire user interface in Reach can be switched into Spanish or French. So if you have native Spanish language speakers who are your volunteers or your team members, they can actually be seeing the whole interface in Spanish thanks to Melinda, who translates it for us. Andy, we're so happy to make your week.
And if folks want additional languages, then we basically have designed Reach in a way that we could make that possible if you provided the translator or paid for the funding of that. So just something else to note for folks who are doing a lot of organizing in languages besides Spanish and French and English.
And there, yeah, and it's also like Kate was talking about. I mean, the ability to target by user groups is really powerful because you can make sure that everything sort of stays, from scripts to survey questions to action cards, they can all be targeted. So only those user groups are seeing, or some user groups aren't seeing them. And it just makes it really nice to manage the workflow of your volunteers and your team. Any other questions? Kate, I have a question for you. So, what does success look like at We the People Action Fund? I'd love to know like a little bit about kind of the big picture of what y'all are doing.
Oh, geez. Um,
Sorry, I should have
yeah,
warned you. I was going to ask
I
that question.
know people don't ask the data manager that a ton. I mean, for us, it's building this statewide coalition of people and then flexing that power to get the working class centered issues done in Michigan. So a little bit about like Michigan geography is there tends to be, and like I'm really like I'm rural, so like that's the part that like I mostly know about, but they're like Michigan's very diverse. But sometimes rurally you get this idea of like, oh, they just like take our money, it goes to Lansing and we get nothing. But then you also get this other side of like when we all band together, that like you don't need a ton of people to like flood a rural town in Michigan. And like you don't need a ton of people to make a massive change in the Latino community in Traverse City, right? So like when you start combining people across race and across class on these issues, that's when you can start mobilizing power to like get the things that we want specifically in the legislature, but like more broadly, we do a ton of stuff at the local level, which I think is some of our most exciting wins because they're almost instant when you pass free driver's ed or you keep a community shelter open. So
That's great. Thank you for that.
mhm.
And it strikes me that almost every state, has that combination of urban and rural. And I think many, many of us, even when I lived in California, this was true, certainly true where I live in New York and rural New York, but have experienced that rural urban divide over and over and over again. And I just love the work that you all are doing to bring people together around issues that impact their everyday lives.
Can I reply to Britt's comment real quick?
Yeah, yeah.
So for content in Reach, there's two ways. There is like a media library in Reach. We don't really use the user generated content. I think we should because I think it'd be a convenient way for people to like get their pictures of an event back to us. But mostly what we use it for is like you can put in there the like event flyer, you can put in there the logo, you can put in there the branding. And then also you can have like social media shares, like you can do a post. So if you have like the social media share for your Mobilize events or a Facebook post or an Instagram post, like you can put all of that in there and then it makes it really convenient for people to share, which especially if you have like a campaign or a base that's a lot more like social media literate or interested in it, then they can really take advantage of that.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, some people do share that content not to social media, but what it does is it brings up like your share feed on your phone. And so I can send it on Signal, I can send it via text, I can send it via email, just the same way you would like an image on your phone. So there's all kinds of different ways. You can also just save it and download it, like Kate was saying, and then, have access to the logo or some media files or whatever. So there's all different kinds of ways that people use that, but it's primarily used for social media. I think partly because many people cut their teeth on Reach content libraries volunteering for the DNC and the Harris Walls campaign, and they used Reach for their social media content sharing. And so for a lot of people, it became, there were many, many volunteers on that. And so that's how they understood use of the content libraries. We also have a function where rather than for the user generated content, rather than people uploading like a piece of content that's meant to be shared on social media, they can also upload files that then the campaign can use. So, for example, Working Families Party, which we'll be talking about this on our blog in the next couple of days, but they have a program where people upload a file. It's a headshot of themselves. Then WFP puts that headshot into a postcard that they then send to that person's friends with their endorsed stuff about their endorsed candidates. So it looks like your friend has just sent you a postcard with their picture on it, telling you about the endorsed candidates, and people get really excited. And they're like, "I got your postcard." So there's all kinds of creative ways to use those various functions.
Just wanted to highlight that you could also use it to share links. So if you are promoting a town hall or if you're promoting a fruit tree giveaway, right? Anything like that, you could also use the functionality for that. It doesn't have to be a static image.
Yeah, or video. Can also be video. And there's some very cool shared galleries in there. Demcast, which is one of the biggest sort of pro-democracy content generators on the left, has a shared gallery, as does Vote Save America, the guys from Pod Save America, and others that you can subscribe to that have kind of general, national, sometimes even like state-specific content for sharing. That's really uh, kind of builds out and gets amplifies the kinds of messaging that a lot of folks in the progressive ecosystem want to be sharing. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? I think Melinda put this in the chat, but if people have stuff they want to learn about, I mean, we try and do these webinars once a month on different topics. All of them end up on our blog with the recording and the slide deck, and there's some good past ones that we've done that you might want to check out on topics ranging from content sharing to relational organizing. But yeah, we love doing these and love hearing your questions and your feedback. So if people have topics they really want to learn about or things that they are thinking about doing with Reach or just generally in organizing, please let us know. We would love to help make it real. Yes, we do still have a partnership with State Voices. In fact, we have a new partnership with State Voices. And Vivian, I will follow up with you about that if you want with the details, but there's some discounts and access to data, and different things. They'll have yeah, I'll send you the lowdown. If you want to DM me, just so I'm sure that I have your correct email, I think I have it, but oh, no, I'll have it because you registered. Don't worry about that. I will grab it. But I will follow up with you, Vivian, with all that information. And that's the other thing. I mean, we have a lot of partnerships with some of the bigger organizations like State Voices and TMC and that provide discounts and access to data and other things. We also, for organizations that maybe don't already have access to data, we can help you access data to use with Reach. We also have some folks are using it without voter data at all, and they're just doing what we call peopleist reach. So they're mostly focusing on content. So we have lots of different, as those of you who've used it know, it's highly customizable to use for however your organization is looking to organize. All right. Well, I think if there are no more questions, um, this was great. And so appreciate, Kate, your time and your expertise and the work that you're doing. We are just so excited to be partnering with you on this. And yeah, just a great model. And Kate has been very generous. So with her time and expertise, and so and putting her email in here for people who want to connect more about the work that they're doing and maybe look at how you might replicate some of it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for joining, and thank you, Kate, as well.